Hello, everybody. It is your Uncle Fish back again for School of Fish Art Stream. J-Man wants Gatling gun on the end of his tail. Oh my goodness. J-Man says the tail's where you put all the heavy artillery. Yeah. Said he used to have a howitzer on the end of his tail. Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of School of Fish. I am your ever-loving Uncle Fish, and this time I have my buddy, your Uncle E. Esteban from Ultra Comics here with me. Super excited to have him back. Welcome, man. I got to let everybody know, we already did this episode once. We filmed it. I was ready to put it out with my newsletter this month, which is why I didn't send out the newsletter yet this month, because I got real disappointed when I saw it got screwed up. Had everything filmed, ready to go. Awesome episode. And then just Freestream ate it, and I didn't get to use it. So, welcome back, Esteban. It's good to have you, man. I'm glad you're here. How are you doing?
Hey, yo, and hello, everybody. It's me, your weird uncle, and I am so glad to be here again at the School of Fish. You know, honestly, it's an honor and a privilege to, be here with a man who has mastered his craft and, again, who has taken the time out of his day to answer a few questions of mine. And I am just glad to be here. And obviously, we're here to learn. We're here to have fun. We're here to just make some fun art and, make art that inspires all and hopefully inspires more.
And that's the thing. Esteban had asked me some really interesting questions about how I do buildings and stuff in Clip Studio. And I've got a lot of tips that I've built on how I make stuff really quickly. And it's all my art, but it helps things go much faster. And I was like, well, if I'm going to share it, I might as well share it. There's no point in just telling him. If we could come on here and I could actually walk him through the process and show him how to do it. I did this already once, but we're going to do it again. And he's already shown me some amazing results that he's gotten from it. But the key for me is building assets that I can use over and over again, and building assets that are built correctly so that I can bend them into perspective and stuff and get the kind of angles that I want. Having a still shot of something is great that you could reuse sometimes if it's a prop or something that will work that way. Like if I'm going to draw a car in the background or a cement truck or something from this last book I just did, I'm going to draw the whole cement truck because I might be able to use it from that angle again later and save some time. But when it comes to buildings and walls and things like that, there are some tips that make this stuff go really well and really quickly. And I wanted to go over some of that. And I got some new stuff that I've picked up since we filmed last time that I think would be really helpful. And I want to try and do some of that. I'm going to make a new page real quick so that I don't mess up the stuff that I've already got saved here. And we're going to just sketch out a random street real quick. I'm going to turn that layer to blue just because that's the way I work. That's how I do. Get my pen here. And I have found from experience that it's much easier for me personally. Things will come out looking a lot better if I sketch out the cityscape the way I want it first, like roughly, and then put in perspective lines. Because if I just come in throwing in perspective lines, I've realized stuff gets really off really quickly. And it gets really skewed. And this way helps me kind of eyeball a little bit better. So, all right, we'll say there's a building right here in the foreground, real close, and then that's the scene that we got. Maybe back guys standing up on top of that.
Right. Actually, another interesting thing, too, as to this topic in general, I will say that this is also one of the most time-efficient type of things that you can ever do. Just take like a couple minutes out of your day, design a few buildings, design a few things here and there, and next thing you know, you're probably going to be able to complete a comic book within like probably half the time. Oh, man.
The backgrounds go so much faster this way, and I'm always thinking of new buildings, and as I'm sketching it out, I'll sketch out a design for a building, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take the time to draw that out right so that I can bring it in here and I can use that building over and over again.
Right. And I was going to say from personal experience, I mean, it took me about half a year, 6 months to create my very first comic book, The Unbeatables. This was, the first book I've ever made. And I wish I knew about the pre-made building brushes because I had to hand draw every single, building by hand. And it was just a time consuming process. And the fact that you're only going to be looking at those backgrounds for like maybe half a millisecond is like insane,
Mm-hmm. All right. Now I've taken, I'm not showing y'all what I'm doing because I'm looking at my screen here and y'all aren't looking at it because I forgot to turn it on. I'm an idiot. I apologize. Okay. So what I did while I wasn't showing you was sketch out these buildings lightly on here, wrong layer, sketch them out, got them all, roughed in the way I wanted it. And I thought y'all were watching, but I wasn't paying attention. And so there we go. Okay, I sketched in the buildings there. I'm going to lower that opacity. I threw up some perspective lines off of that now for the vanishing point in the sky, the vanishing point for these. Having those roughed out helps me lay this out and not get the perspective all out of whack. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to come in with my line shape tool here, and let's see, we're going to go a little bit bigger on that, and I'm going to come in and block out these buildings. I'm going to block out the outlines, and contrary to the way I did it last time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make these lines are probably going to be the outside lines of my buildings.
Okay.
I may change that. I can always go in and tweak it if I need to do something to change the shape, like if the trim of the building or something needs to stick out for the rooftop or something, I can always go back and change that. But I'm going to go ahead and leave these. I've crossed over in some places, and I'm going to use my erase tool, make sure it's set to the right erase, and trim off all those little extra lines. This is where vector inking is, this is so much faster doing these on a vector layer. It seems confusing if you've never worked with vector layers before, but once you get the hang of it, oh my God, it goes so much faster than having to sit here and scribble out that whole line.
Oh my God, yeah, for sure. I mean, especially for me, because I still, till this day, most of my art is done through Procreate, so we don't have like the vector scales. We just only have like the typical, like whatever default, or the opposite of vectors. So
the raster. Yeah.
Raster. So we have a lot of those. So I wish Procreate had that kind of thing. And trust me, if that was the case, it would have been an unstoppable app. And I feel like everyone would have just been fleeting to get iPads and Apple Pens and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, but this is really good stuff. I love how you're doing, like, at this point, it looks like 3-point perspective, if I'm incorrect.
Yeah. So yeah. And this was quick and easy to lay out. I'm just throwing in some lines on another layer just to help me when I'm laying these buildings out. It helps me to have like a little bit of a grid on them to make sure that it'll give me something to try and line the lines up to when I can't see where the bottom of this building goes.
Right.
And I'm trying to stretch the image for this side into perspective. I can't see where the bottom edge is. This will give me some lines to help measure up to make sure I'm keeping it straight.
So there's a consistency throughout every building that you're, putting your template on.
Yeah. Because especially this one, I only see 2 edges of this building, but this gives me more lines to match up that image to that we're going to use here in a second. And I may not have explained it well already because I forget that we've already talked about this, but nobody else has seen it but us.
Right.
I have a whole bunch of pre-made building templates that I've created into images, into assets that I can use to then paste on the sides of these buildings and stretch into perspective to make these buildings go really quickly. And it's my artwork that I drew. It looks like my style. It looks like the buildings I would have drawn anyway. It just makes the whole thing go so much faster.
Right.
Let me see if I can pull up one of those files while we're chit chatting. Let's see. I've
Yeah,
created
so,
my own clip art file because I have so many assets now.
right. And I was also going to mention too, it's not just buildings. Obviously, you can do a lot more other things with it. And I mean, more or less staying on topic with at least the building stuff, it's always good to at least come up with different styles. And I remember we spoke about this again when we first recorded, and I wish, but anyways. But I remembered when discussing that, say, for instance, you have a particular kind of character that lives in a uniquely, different kind of style of a city. Like, you don't want to put Batman in a very metropolis heavy or metropolis coded area where it's bright and hopeful, and you put Superman in Gotham, like, so each building, depending on, say, the location and depending on, the setting, the tone, you also want to create buildings that are according to that, said, tone in a way, So if you have like a Gothic city, you want to have Gothic looking buildings. And if you want to have a city that looks bright and hopeful and full of, future technology, you kind of want to make buildings akin to that.
And that's one thing, like every time we travel, I'm taking pictures when we go through big cities of like, what do the warehouses look like in the warehouse district? What does, the industrial stuff look like? What does, the big bright downtown look like? What do the slums look like as we drive past them on the freeway? And I'm making, a reference for myself to be able to go back and look at and say, okay, here's some new styles of buildings I didn't think about. Here's some cool ways to stick windows on a building for a hospital that I had never thought of doing before. Because if we're stuck to our own imagination, we're only going to go so far. You need to be out looking at references, seeing what other creative architects did. And just like I've spent my life studying comic books and what makes comic books look cool and how to draw cool characters really quickly and make cool costumes and stuff, and I know all these little ins and outs of what makes a costume look cool, the architects spent their life studying how to make cool looking buildings in all kinds of cool different ways and what makes this style neat over that style. And like, I've just been working on a book where it's in suburbia and I'm trying to make all the houses look differently. So I've been studying like craftsman architecture, mid-century modern architecture. So each one of these houses looks different and it doesn't just look like a million copies of my dad's house that I grew up in, because I want the neighborhood to look like there's houses from all over the place.
I mean, or you could just pull an Edward Scissorhands because, the entire film, almost every house looked basically the same, except like they're all just a different color.
Yeah. So here's the template that I built originally for making my buildings, and all of these are separate pieces and stuff that I can turn on and off. I could have just a building with those windows on the side of it, and then I could go in and draw what I wanted. I saw one building as we were traveling that had this large stone structures, on the outside and the center, and the windows recessed. So I drew that as an option. And I just drew a lot of different styles of buildings. Like if this was like for the side of a tenement building or something, glass and steel type designs.
Very industrial in appearance.
Yeah, I can add that large stone one to this one or take it off. Much more concrete, looking. This started out, one of these designs in here, this one was actually a parking garage that was near our hotel, and I was impressed with the shape, so I copied that, and then I added some bars in there to make it a very depressing looking office building or something. But like for the side of an FBI building, that looks great.
Oh, that's some very interesting stuff. I mean, I was also going to mention too that it's not just buildings that these presets are good for. So obviously, if you're going to make a lot of presets, and again, my best example that I can have so far is again my first book. That if you're going to make any presets, you obviously want to make, say for instance, because I make superhero comics, for me the logos matter a lot.
Oh yeah.
We were having this discussion about like, I can draw Superman like God knows how many times, but at some point his S is just going to get very annoying because either it gets too intricate or it gets too simple or it gets lost in translation. So sometimes the easiest thing you can do is just make a preset brush of Superman's, logo. You can just put it on his chest, when you're done posing, the character just right. I've done it with Character Ultra Power. I did it, didn't do it with the Emerald Turtle because he only wears a mask and boots and gloves and stuff, and so on and so forth. But superhero designs are, especially when you're designing a superhero, and if a logo is extremely, important to the character, it would be nice to have like that pre-made logo and then just have it kind of like, what Mr. Fish is showing off right over here.
Oh yeah, this is from the Eagle Force line of action figures that I do some comic book style backings for the toys for, that have a little comic book about the character, and
Right.
they've got this logo that's on everybody. Everybody has it on them somewhere. Maybe it's on, a patch on the side of their arm. Maybe it's on their beret over here, and having this image that I can just bring over here, and let me see, bring this over here, and I'm going to change it to free transform. I can just bring this guy over here and pull it into shape so he fits in perspective on that patch, or I can bring him over here and stretch it and bend it until he fits into perspective on this
Right.
patch correctly, and boom, you got the logo done. Maybe in an image that you're working on, maybe you've got to stretch that Superman S too far, but if that's the case, then you could always just turn that into like a blue layer and then come in and draw over it, and at least you know where everything is. At least you have that laid out correctly in perspective, and if we needed to come add, to make it raised or whatever, we could do that now. But that helps us get everything laid out quickly and know where it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like at this angle. And that saves me so much time. I do this with guns now. If I have to draw a gun in a book, which I have to do a lot, I go ahead and draw the whole gun out in detail so
Right.
I can, if I need it from this angle, again, I can rotate it, I can move it. Maybe I can skew it a little bit and it works. Or maybe, let me see, if I have to skew it too far, then at least I can use it as my pencils, and I know where the clip needs to be, where the handle is, where the trigger is, where the scope will be, and then I can redraw it very quickly rather than having to try and map it all out in my head and then wondering why doesn't it look quite right. It's such a big help time-wise.
Real quick, before we continue any further, I just want to say hello to my friends Mika and Alexis that are currently on stream. Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Oh yeah. Oh man, we got all kinds of people coming in here. Let's throw the overlay on there so we can get some comments popping up. What is up, everybody? Sorry I did not even see it. I've been so busy trying to talk about this awesome way of doing buildings because it's freaking cool.
It really-
All right, so we're gonna get to it now. All right, I've got the buildings laid out. I've got some reference lines laid out. Now I'm going to import some of those building faces that I've created. Import image. I'm going to go to my own personal little clip art file here where I make all kinds of reusable assets. I'm going to come down to my buildings. And this is the one thing, the one note that I tried to make a big point last time we talked about it.
Yes.
Use white backgrounds when you make these files. Originally, I didn't, because I just wanted it to be the black outlines, which
Right.
is fine for a PNG, but when I go to look at my preview image, I can't tell what that building is. If I use a white background image, I can tell what that building is now. So that's one little thing I would definitely recommend. That makes a big difference.
Now, I would say probably best recommended for Clip Studio because, again, I use Procreate. Procreate is my default program.
Yeah.
So for me, we would actually have to invert stuff like this. You say, for instance, if I wanted to make a building design, I would make the lines, black at first, and then I would invert it to white. So then I could put that into the brush settings and have it all modified. And thankfully with Procreate, you can tell what your brushes relatively look like because, they have that on display when you're choosing a new brush. So again, this is coming from a Procreate artist perspective. And, kind of good to make sure that we have a Clip Studio Procreate kind of a difference here. So then that way we kind of have a better sense of understanding on that. And
Yeah.
also, you were mentioning weapons, and the other day I started making a bunch of like sci-fi related weapons, like battle axes and spears, laser guns, all that other kind of stuff. And a cool thing about all those other kind of unique weapons is that you can use that in perspective. Like obviously, say you have a character wielding a battle axe, instead of like just popping it in there, you can obviously modify it to make it look like that they're holding it, or again, you can use it as the outline, like you were saying. So again, really good stuff, to keep in mind. So presets are the way to go. I can imagine there's some digital artist out there who's drawing Thor and is just using a copy and paste method of drawing his hammer somewhere out there,
Hmm. Oh yeah, well, especially like for certain angles and stuff, or like we were saying for Superman's chest. Like if you're putting that inscription on the side of Thor's hammer, making an asset that you can reuse to have all of that laid out. Maybe you go back and redraw it so it looks like it's etched in from the right angle, but that would lay everything out and give you a pattern to work from, which I end up doing a lot. A lot of times I end up redrawing some of these things when it's going to be big detail, but this gives me a pattern to work from, and that saves time, and time is money. All right,
Yeah.
I'm trying to pick out which ones of these buildings I want to use. I definitely want to use that one. I don't think I'm going to use this one. Trying to see in the dark here. Yeah, that's okay. You can delete it. And all right, I'm gonna turn some of these off for now and get to work. Okay, I like this one here, so I'm going to set this layer to multiply so I can see through it. I'm gonna just kind of match that corner up, and I'm set to free transform, so I can just move this guy around until I get that blue line to match up with the corner edge here. So I've got that corner pretty well lined up there. Grab this side until I get this other corner in line. There we go. And then move this. And this is where those other lines come in handy. I've matched up the side angle there.
Yep.
But the floors weren't quite in line, so I'm going to try and match up some of those lines as close as I can, and that looks pretty close right there. So okay, I've got that side done. I am going to copy and paste that object, and then I can just grab this corner of it. Let's see, let's undo.
Yep.
All right, let's see. I'm going to right click and duplicate, see if that works any better, and then move it over here and get this corner to match. And now I only have to move this other side, and everything should be pretty well lined up. And now that building is ready to, that building's pretty much done. Now the next step, and this is part of why I'm leaving those, I went ahead and made the black outlines for the buildings first, is because now I can come in and grab, say, that one. I'm going to right click on it, layer mask, and I'm going to say mask outside the selection. Nothing is selected. I didn't make a selection with my selection tool. So when I say mask outside the selection, everything just disappears. And then I'm going to come in with my paint bucket tool. I'm on the mask layer, and I'm going to paint inside this shape. Oops, wait a minute. I got to reset my paint bucket tool. Paint bucket tool.
Oh, so right over here.
Refer to multiple. There we go. All right. Now I have my paint bucket tool set to refer to all the layers it can see. So it's going to stop on these outlines. So when I click in there, boom, it's masked off to that little spot. I'm going to grab the other layer, and I'm going to right click, layer mask, mask outside selection. I'm going to find my mouse on the right screen. I'm going to get the paint bucket tool. I'm going to paint inside that section, and boom. There is no way on earth I drew that building as fast as I just laid that out.
Yeah.
And that's with chit-chatting half the time. I mean, we really laid that out quickly. Now I'm going to look for one of my other buildings. Okay, we'll stick this one down here. All right. I'm going to turn my
Perfect.
blue layer back on. Any questions so far?
I mean, no, I mean everything seems pretty. I mean everything so far seems very much on par for the course, and I mean, again, I mean, if I didn't know, like, again, had I not been here and if I didn't see this, I would have just assumed you were a very skilled, like, architect to just designing buildings like this. Because again, these are like, I guess something that you have to keep into consideration when making, you know, a setting in general is that people aren't going to be looking at the buildings as much as they are the characters. Even for people who say that they, look at every detail, you're only going to be looking at this maybe for a couple of seconds because the main focus is the characters themselves. So
it should be. You should be caring more about the characters.
Yes, obviously.
Than you are about, all the cool little details I put on there. And you can still go in and add extra details. You can take out stuff. You can do all kinds of cool stuff to this afterwards and make it something new and unique. But for laying out the basics of all the boring stuff and making sure that, all the windows are the right size and all that stuff, there's just no competition for how quickly this goes.
Right.
And you just can't beat it. For knocking out stuff for production work, for trying to make a living at making comics, this is hands down one of the best tips I've ever picked up. And boom, we've got another building in there, just pretty as you please.
Yeah, and actually something else I noticed about your building presets, because for me, I tend to draw my buildings like actually like in a rectangle. Like, yes, you do as well, but you don't really like close off like the sides or the top or bottom. It's more like you're just designing a lot more of the windows and or just the brick pattern layers. So it's like you don't completely close it off because you're obviously kind of like how you just drew the line layer. It's very interesting how you just kind of like left it as like you didn't completely close it off by bordering out the side of the entire thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's actually something that I picked up along the way as I was figuring this out through trial and error. Is a lot of times, a lot of the buildings, I want to have little details, along the edge. I want the trim at the top to stick out a little bit more. So if that's sticking out further, I don't really need those interior lines. They're not going to line up straight when I bend it into perspective.
Right.
So leaving some of those edges open and unclosed lets me go in later and draw all kinds of cool architectural detail on that corner to show that, this is a real detailed molding going across there that's being explained in a handful of lines, which also my style is also based on simplicity and an economy of line and not just, how much cool cross-hatching can I stick on the page? But it works well for my stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, as a man who has read your works, I can very much understand that. You make everything as clear, simple, very easy on the eyes to understand who I'm supposed to be caring about in the story. Perfect stuff all around.
Yeah, it's all about readability and legibility for me. And if it's not making the story go forward or not making it more clear what's going on, then I don't need to add it. Like, if I'm drawing Harley Quinn eating a banana, let's say, I don't need to put a million lines of cross-hatching on that banana to make you understand it's more of a banana. As long as you look at it and say, that's a banana, I'm good. As long as it's clear and it looks nice and it tells the story, that's all I need. I don't need somebody to be like, wow, dude, I could sit here and stare at that banana for hours, man. Where did you... Nobody's looking at that banana for hours,
Exactly.
And I've had people argue with me about on these buildings like, I would sit there and look at those buildings for days. No, you wouldn't. You're a liar. You're not going to look at it for that long.
Yeah, because
you're not going to look at it for as long as it took me to draw it. And again, this is all my own artwork. This is all my own stuff. So it looks like the buildings I would have drawn anyway. One thing I did notice on this one, you see how I put like a darker line on one side and thinner on the other?
Yes.
I was planning around it being bent into perspective, but I did it the wrong way. So
Mm,
I'm going to move it and reshape it over here. So those dark lines will be going the right way. And if I need to go in and accentuate those or something, I can totally do that.
right. Also, a friend over here has a really good point. At that point, too much shading and or cross hatching brings the attention to the wrong object. So
Exactly. It can make stuff
it's tough.
super muddy and confusing if it's not done perfectly. And I love cross hatching and stuff. I studied it so hard my whole life. I love it, but ultimately I was reading the DC series of books on like DC's Guide to Penciling, DC's Guide to Inking and
Mm,
Coloring and all this stuff at one point. And in the inking book, the writer said something that really struck me and it forever changed the way I work. And what they said was essentially, hold on a second. This is big fishy time to talk. What they said was, when you get done with your job, you should be able somebody should be able to look at the page and know what's going on in the story without anybody else having to do their job. So when you get done with the pencils, somebody should be able to look at that and be able to tell, oh, this is Esteban in the Wild West and he's reaching for his gun, but he sees something out of the corner and he's scared. Like, you should be able to know what's going on. If the inker has to clean it up so that you can tell, oh, that's a gun. Oh, okay. I thought that was a carrot. If somebody else has to clean it up so it makes sense, you didn't do your job right.
mm,
And when you get done inking, you should be able to tell what everything is without the colorist having to come in and separate things. And I realized a lot of my overcomplicated inking I learned from the 90s was muddying stuff up and it wasn't making it clear. And if I couldn't hold that page across the room and glance at it and tell what was going on, it was too complicated.
mm,
And so I started cutting out a whole lot of the cross hatching. I started using a lot more like spot black shadows in places and really counting on line weight to tell you what's going on more than how many feathered lines I could stick in there.
right.
And everything became a lot clearer quickly and it sped me up a lot, which I'm not going to knock. That's great.
I mean, yeah, of course, that's the most valuable aspect of things. Again, look, I live by this. I try to live by this. You got to keep life to the easiest. That also means if you got to find a way to make your art, with efficiency, with a sense of simplicity, and go for that route, because eventually, obviously you can advance later down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm all for. I have a rule that I will not put out an ugly book anymore. After being confronted by one of my 90s heroes when I showed him my work, and he very politely told me that it sucked, and I came back with all these excuses because well, you don't understand. This guy was a jerk and that guy wasn't paying very well, and this has become one of my biggest pieces of advice to anybody since is that doesn't matter.
Mm,
Nobody is going to know that. You're not going to be standing over their shoulder when they read the book to explain, oh, well, see, you don't understand. He's a jerk and he was only paying $20 a page. So they don't know that. All they know is this is your work and this is your name. This is the kind of work Fish does. That's all they know. And that broke my heart and made me really mad at him. And I went home and thought about it and realized he was right, which made me even madder.
ah,
And then I decided from then on, I was never going to put out another crappy looking page. And my career has done a lot better since. I've gotten a lot better jobs. My pay rate shot up because people know they can count on me to always put out quality work. I know a lot of artists out there that they have their $150 a page work and they have their $50 a page work,
mm,
and it's very different quality. And I know other people that I've heard talk about their work be like, man, I'd really like to hire him, but I don't know what I'm going to get because every time I see a book from him, it looks vastly different. Nobody else knows that this guy was only paying $50. So he just got ballpoint pen on a sheet of paper, sketched out in ink. I'm not going to bother cleaning anything up. You get what you get.
Right.
And then this guy got pencils and inks and all kinds of detail. They don't know the difference because the page rate isn't listed on the page. All they know is this is his name and his work is wildly inconsistent. And I'm not going to be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good, at least like a good, I mean, that in itself is already like a good life lesson. I mean, no matter what you do, stay consistent. And if people enjoy that form of consistency, people are going to reward that, obviously, so it's very, very understandable, Now, for me, obviously, I tried working on like other books as well. And style-wise, they had to be very different, like I was working on one with Lucky 33 called The Galactic Delivery Dudes. It was like a,
man.
It's still in progression, but it's like a very Nickelodeon 90s style kind of book.
I'm so looking forward to that one.
Oh my gosh, I am still in the process of it. I have like a couple more pages until this book is done. I'm looking at it right now. I'm like, I look at those pages again. I'm like, I think that's some of my best work yet. But again, like if I do my superhero stuff, there's a very distinct style, So always keep it to account. Stay consistent in what you do. But if you're talking about doing a different style, always just kind of like keep that part into consideration,
Mm-hmm. It's good motivation. You get knocked down, but it makes you want to get back up and do better. Absolutely. And like that challenge to myself of I will never put out another crappy looking book has actually made some of the best pages I've done have been for the most difficult clients. And I'm not going to name anybody or point anybody out, but like when people are just throwing you random stuff and they gave anybody that wanted to pay $50 a chance to put something in the book, and now they're giving me a sea of crazy crap that I have to stick together and make look cool. Oh my God, that was so frustrating, but it ended up coming up with some of the best pages that I've ever done because I was not going to let the fact that the dude was crazy, that the dude didn't want to pay much, that the dude was blaming me for the book being late. I wasn't letting any of that stop me. It was going to be an awesome looking book. And it came out to be one of the better looking sets of pages I've ever done, even though there's all the craziest stuff you could imagine thrown in on one thing. But it's a good challenge for me, and it's made me put out better work and consistent work, and it's gotten me a lot of good jobs. This is how quickly those assets work. We've been at this for 37 minutes, and 30 of those minutes have been me talking, and I've got this city scene done. I could throw in some clouds with a brush and stuff. We could put heroes on all these buildings, but boom, that's done. If you wanted to do different style buildings, you could draw different style images. Just draw it nice and flat, straight on. I sometimes will put darker lines on one side like I did on the building in the foreground to hint at a shadow. I don't go too crazy with it because like I don't want to put heavy shadows underneath the window sills because if we're looking up like this, that's fine. If you're looking down at it, that doesn't work anymore. Right. So I try and keep it subtle. And then if I need to, I can come in now that I've got this all done and let me turn my brush down.
It gives off a unique sense of depth, just in general with some aspects. Again, those windows are showing a not too deep, but not too flattened out depth of the windows. They look like that they're just average sized windows. And I mean, now that you're adding in that part right there, and then next thing you know, you add a curve to that window right there, it looks like it's popping out just a touch more. So it's not,
Yeah, now we can come in and we can put in all the details that we want to, make it look more 3D. And, we could put a little planter on her window with some flowers in it and stuff and, all that. And then we could take another brush that we've made and I don't want that to be purple. And let's see how that's too small. We need to go bigger, Fishy. There we go.
Go bigger, go home.
Now we could like run some cabling down here where they're running to the, the satellite box, and we could, let's do a
I
bigger
think this is
line.
something that I think this was something else that you did in your other example when we first recorded this. You were like the cabling, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I feel like that should have been. Did we touch up on that idea before? No, or am I just going crazy?
Oh no, yeah, we talked about this last time, and like we could run a power line across there, and now you can put in all the other little details and stuff. You could even make assets. I did it at one point, but I don't know where they are. I don't know what computer they're on right now. But like I even made an asset that had like the bottom and the sides of a fire escape, so I could come in and like rough that in, and then bring the bottom in, bend it to shape, bring the sides in, put them on, bring the ladder in and bend it to shape so that it comes down this way, and you got your fire escape on there.
Mm.
All of this stuff makes these things real easy. This is a scene right here from I was working on a new issue of the Sentinels right now, and I knew a lot of it was going to take place in the trophy room, and a lot of the scenes were going to be focused on this doorway wall that has this painting over it and these sculptures and all of this stuff. And I really dig Micro City here. That's kind of a nod to Kandor and
Right.
from Superman. And let me see, I'm gonna merge these and convert them into image material. Anyway, I really like it, and I knew it was going to show up in several scenes because there's like a model of it in the trophy room, and then the real actual one is like tucked away in the armory, and we were going to see both of them in this book. So I went ahead and drew a really nice detailed image of it from this angle, and I also have it laid out in vector format in one place where I accidentally cut some of this off, but where I could redraw it easily. It has all the guides and stuff laid in it in vector, and now I can move this guy around in the foreground. And I made independent pieces of like this model of Cyberilla and his tank, the statue of Captain Amazing, and and Meccano are all separate pieces and can be moved around, and we can zoom in and out on this. The painting is a separate piece, and all of these things can be like, I can take them and take the whole folder with everything in it and then go to free transform and bend it a little bit, bring those sides in a little bit and bring that in and put that whole thing at a bit of an angle now. And usually a lot of things, especially if they're flat, like walls and things and computer monitor screens and stuff like that, will work perfectly fine like this, and I won't have to do much else than maybe add a little shadow on one side or something.
Right.
And maybe you can move these guys, you can move them around a lot. Sometimes just a little bit of transform on them will make them look a little bit more like they're in perspective and be okay. That
Yeah.
still looks a little too flat. But if I need to do that, I can bend him into perspective and then redraw him, and I know where everything is.
Mm-hmm.
But for it's also cool to be able to take these things and like I can enlarge this guy and put him further down in the corner. I can enlarge this guy and bring him further down here. And I can do that with all the pieces. And now we're zooming in through the room, going past everything, and it's moving past me without having to draw all the little details of Micro City all over again and get all those little details right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is so nice for so many things. Another thing that I did is I knew I knew for this book I'm working on right now, this guy releases a sea of mechanical wasps that are flying all over the place. And so I knew I either get to draw a billion mechanical wasps flying around in little bitty tiny detail, or I could make a brush that could spray out mechanical wasps. So in the process of building this brush, I came up with something that kind of blew my mind I hadn't thought about before. When I want lots of versions of something, but I don't want the same image over and over again of it.
Yeah, that's
Like having a brush that throws bats out is really cool, but if it's all the same shaped bat, that just looks like you stuck Halloween decorations up there. You need the bats with their wings in all kinds of different positions and stuff. They need to look like individual creatures. What I did was I created like an object of the upper body with his legs kind of tucked in, and then his tail is a separate piece, and it's the full tail all the way up to the little stump that goes, in his abdomen or thorax or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And each one of these things, you can take the little center point here and move it up to where like the leg joins. Grab this little center point and move it up here. And now when we rotate it, it'll rotate there where his leg is joined to the body. And we'll do the same thing for the wings, because apparently when I saved it before I did this to everything. It will move the wings up here to where they join. And so I just made everything as its own independent piece. And now I could render this image as, I could register that as an image material to make a brush stamp. And then I can take it and move his wings, and so he's in a different pattern of his little flapping, because they're mechanical, they're all identical. Great for things like bugs and spiders and wasps and flies and
again,
things like that.
And again, sorry to interrupt, but this is an amazing, again, just amazing sense of efficiency, a sense of time management as well, because the fact that you're able to just slightly modify a little bit here and there, and regardless it's still going to look the same, because again, in this particular case it's a mechanical wasp. So drawing like a horde of them, I can imagine you can probably do like maybe 10 different little mechanical wasps of different movements and different positions, and you can just already put like a whole thing together in no time. So again, like creating pre-made brushes, yes, it's a cheat, but also in this case, in the comic book industry, it's pretty good to cheat on your homework, because you gotta get it out.
Yeah, you got to get this stuff out, and you want it to look good. I don't want it to look like I just threw a bunch of little black squiggles on a page and faked the wasps, because everybody know I didn't want to have to draw a million wasps. Every movement I put on this can now be a new image that I'm saving for a new wasp, and it goes so quickly, so fast. I wish I had thought of this part of it sooner. And I realized, because I've made characters this way to animate them, like I've done full characters from Green Zone, where every piece of their body is a separate piece like this, so I can move all those pieces around and have it look like they're talking and whatnot for animated bits to pitch the books.
I think the term for that would be called like cookie cutter animation, where again it's like every segment, it's kind of like there's a joint here, a joint here, there's a sense of movement or something like that. And that's what I remember it being called.
Yeah, they're like the little paper puppets we used to make with the little pins in the corners, so you could move them around. It's basically that. And this works really great. And all I'm thinking now is I need to draw one from the side. I need to draw one from the back, so I can move all those little pieces around and make brushes going in all these different directions. And then, when you put all that into a brush and you make all those different versions and you save it and everything, let's see. Let's turn that off and let's
And
go.
again, like my friend is saying, like work smarter, not harder. This and again,
Yeah.
look at like I said, just different, positionings of the wasp here and there, and it doesn't look like you just, stamped a bunch of little things together, but now they look like an actual intricate horde of, mechanical killer wasps.
And it takes time to do it, but taking the time to do it is worth it. Like, it's worth investing the time in it if it makes everything else go so much faster.
100%, yeah.
I'm going to give you a sneak peek at something that I probably shouldn't be giving away yet. But I've been working on a book with our buddy T.S. Luther, and I'm super excited about it, and it's epic. I'm trying to see if I can.
I try not to give anything too spoilery. Yeah, I want ADS to be the one to go all out on this one. I don't think it's kind of fair.
Oh gosh. Okay, I'm not going to do the pages, but I know I've got some images here.
And also to answer one of the comments, my buddy here, Mr. Fish, is currently using Clip Studio, which is also known as Manga Studio to some others out there. That's the program he uses, but I use Procreate for, my digital related art and such. But that's to answer the question. Anyways,
this is the house from Lord of the Manor, and I designed this all in separate pieces. I figured out I looked at a whole lot of different Victorian houses and stuff, and I decided on like what I wanted the house to look like, and it needed to have a big tower in it, and so we had that part down. And what I decided I wanted to do is this section over here on the side, this protrusion on the side, it has the exact same protrusion on the other side. Like, that makes an L through the back of the house, which makes it a lot easier to draw. It's a lot easier when the other side of the house is just a mirror image of this side. It's easier for me to keep it in my head, and I had to make less assets to build this house. But to build this house, I ended up making like a floor plan for what it looks like from the top, which I can lay down into perspective. And even though it gets pretty skewed and bent up, I can then use that to loft lines up in real 3D perspective and know where the tower needs to be, where does the edge of this porch need to be, where would the center of this roof be, where would the edges of these walls be, and I can lay all that out, pencil it out, and then I have separate individual pieces. Go to import again. Oh, let's go back to the right.
Again, in the process, you're also laying you're essentially almost, again, this is where you're borderline like an architect, because you got to create like the actual building itself, the floor plans, depending if, like, say for instance, if there's a story that's specific to that building. Obviously you want to make sure you have like a proper building plan. That's actually the reason why in most cartoons, like say for instance in Family Guy in this case, because I think that's like the most consistent house I've ever seen in the entirety of my life, from like top floor, bottom floor, whatever. Like, you can tell that house has a form of structure. And also, before we continue any further, hi fiance, how you doing? My fiance is currently on stream.
Hi fiance.
Good stuff. But yeah, that's actually really good stuff to keep in mind for sure. And again, you're having to look at a Victorian style house, having to do your research on different locations and, different, architectural structures and seeing the origins of that. And of course, that can inspire, very unique types of buildings. And again, the floor plans, the window layouts, everything in between makes a lot of sense to really dive into something like that. So in a weird way, artists for comic books are costume designers, architects, and,
man. Like, you've got to have it all. But each one of the pieces for it, like the flat interior wall on the interior side of that L is here. Like, these are the windows that are under that big porch. Those are the windows that are above it. The end wall with the little breakfast nook type thing sticking out on the side is here. The sides of the flat edge of that nook, the corner sides of the nook are there. The railings for the front porch are there. The railings for the stairs, the molding for outside, the little spikes on top of the roof, the flat side of the tower that goes up. So once I've plotted out where all those lines are off of my floor plan, then I can go back in and start placing these things in place and then start drawing in the other stuff I have to draw, like the
Hmm.
curves of the roof and all those things. And I can be done with it so quickly. It's ridiculous. I made a hedge wall for the front. I've got the hedge wall with the big stone ogre archway and the gate is one piece. I've got the hedge wall with just the stone ogre. I've
Right.
got just the stone ogre gate himself. I've got just the gate door. So I can move all these pieces around if I want to.
Hmm.
Uh, the water tower shows up in the background of a whole lot of scenes. So I made a
Right.
really nice detailed version of the water tower. His alarm clock shows up a few times, so I made a detailed version of it. And here's a tip: I went ahead and the little the numbers are all outlined. I'm going to go ahead and import it so you can see the whole shape of the eights are outlined. So when I go to color it, I
You
can
can just
color in the
block out
numbers that
the
I need and let those other parts stay dark. Like sometimes when you look at the alarm clock and you can kind of see that shadowy area in there, I
yeah,
can now paint that a different color. I can paint this to be AM or PM, whatever I want, and it looks like an actual clock. And
that that is smart.
it's and go free transform, you bend it a little bit and now, that clock is laying at perspective, kind of kicked back with a little bit of a slant on it, like my clock has, and
Hmm.
boom, we're done. It may or may not look like my clock that I have by my bed. I'm not commenting
But
on that.
actually, so when you were kind of showing off all the assets to this particular structure, it reminded me of a, again, because me living in Florida, we can go to Hollywood Studios, Disney and all that kind of stuff. And I know that there's like a tour that you can go through in Hollywood Disney, and one of them is where it shows the invention of the multi-plane camera. In a weird way, you showing off, these house assets are almost in a weird way kind of like that, where everything is on a, like a different layer of some type of like transparent, film screen type situation.
Hmm.
And obviously depending on how like you want to use perspective, because obviously the whole thing like it stretches or it compresses depending on how you want to view something. Now obviously that's usually primarily for like a front perspective type stuff situation, but in this case because given this is comics, you have to kind of play around with the structures a lot more. But yeah.
And here I took that floor plan, I laid it out, I extruded some lines up, and then put them all in from a different angle, and you get the house from a different side. And then I could go in and add some extra shadows to the sides that needed it. I added a little shadow to the sides of those poles to make them feel a little thicker.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a little stiff there. I could have redrawn that if I wanted to, and I would have had it all in perspective. And I did do it sometimes, but for this image, for what I needed, that was plenty uh, to get the point across. And boom, you've got this neat little detailed house. And like we were saying earlier, if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it right so that you can reuse it later. So I went ahead and drew this house out in detail. I drew out all the trees and bushes and stuff on the property on this little hill, and so I can reuse this piece. And because a lot of times all I needed of the building was a silhouette or a shadow that it was casting or something,
Right.
and to make it feel creepy in the book and have like the shadow of the building laying across the car and the windshield as some dude's looking at it, stuff like that to give you a feeling of dread. So reusing this piece is real easy without it feeling like it's copy and paste when I turn it into a silhouette or I do something else with it.
Hmm.
uh, if you're going to do it right so that you can reuse it.
Yeah, and I mean, again, everything coming down to just taking the time. And honestly, and I will say this, making a bunch of the presets to different sides of a building, to different, like that kind of stuff. Honestly, give yourself, like, to any young artist out there, to any artist in general, give yourself like a solid 5 minutes of building, right? Just do 5 minutes to design one side of a building. And honestly, the fact that you can start using those like 5 minute made, building presets, and you can start putting them into your works. Again, time efficiency. The fact that you can create a whole page in like less, probably half the time. Because again, it took me like 6 months to make my first book, and the majority of the book was just primarily buildings. There was a lot of like areas all around, and I had to try to create different type of things. When in reality, I could have just done this exact hack, and my book would have been done maybe half the time.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that I just found out recently that you can do in Clip Studio that I didn't know you could do until just now is you can register things. It probably did look familiar, didn't it?
It did look familiar. Now that
I'm not giving away secrets. You mind your business, sir. How dare you? I never. Where are my pearls? I feel a clutching coming on.
My word.
Something that I didn't know we could do in Clip Studio until recently is I can come in and grab these vector layers here of these computer wall that I built for an old issue of the Sentinels when they were, in this meeting room. And I knew I was going to have to draw this room from several angles, several times. And I didn't want to have to redraw all these computer things, but I want it to look cool and futuristic, like the Danger Room from the old issues of X-Men. So I drew it in a layer where the main wall is one piece, and then those inner screens are another piece. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to select those. I'm going to turn off the background, and then I'm going to register this as an image material. I put it on my top menu bar, but most of you won't have that. So you would go to edit, and then you would go down to register image. And it's not going to give you a whole lot of options here because you're exporting vector layers, but I'm just going to label this computer wall 01. And then I'm going to tell it that I want to put it in the downloads file because that's where I put everything. I need to get better organized because it's got everything in it now. So now, all right, I'm going to turn those off, and I'm going to come over here to my downloads file. That's not my downloads. There's my downloads. Look at that. There's my computer wall. I'm going to click and drag it over here, and it drops it into place. It drops both of those vector layers in here. So they are full-on vector layers. I can manipulate the whole thing however I want. I'm going to select both of those layers. I'm going to go to free transform like I've been doing. I'm going to pull this over here. I'm going to pull this down. Okay, boom. We got that as a vector layer now. I can now click on the inner screens layer, and I can go to like move tool and just bump them over a little bit. And now all those screens are recessed in that area.
That's actually awesome. That is really amazing.
Oh, yeah. And it's still vector layers, so you can still come in and grab everything. So they're all still editable objects that I imported, not just like a PNG that I exported the way I've been doing my other assets. Right. So like I can grab those inner circles and move them out, and then come in and erase that little piece, and now we got knobs sticking out or lights sticking out, whatever we wanted. This is so freaking cool to still have all the maneuverability of them being vector layers, and I can change the width of the lines if I want to. I'm not just stuck with whatever I did the first time around. I downloaded some Japanese window assets, and they were set up like this, and I was like, wait a minute, you can do that? And so each one of the pieces of the windows that I have that I downloaded to check out are separate pieces. So I can take that bottom part of the window that's recessed, and once I bend everything into perspective, I can pull that recessed part of the window back so that it's recessed. I can pull the panes of the glass in so they're recessed now. It's so freaking nice to have all of that accessibility still there, and it's not just a flat image. I can do whatever I want to it now, and
again, give it a depth, give it a sense of like, actually like a sense of life, ironically enough, so that's spectacular. And again, something that probably, I don't know if I touched on this already, but I was touching on the idea of like different tones and aesthetics for, say, just modern cities. This doesn't just apply to, say, modern or, superhero related cities. This also can apply to sci-fi societies. This can apply to obviously fantasy related, towns and cities, of course, to taverns and all that other kind of stuff. So don't just try to restrict yourself to one particular setting. This can apply to borderline everything. In every fantasy, in every genre, in every, concept you kind of got out there,
Oh yeah, man. You can use it for all kinds of things. Hallways, floors. Oh my God, do I use it for floors? I have several different floor, like tile and stuff, textures that I use religiously. And they just work so well. And I've got like honeycomb textures and stuff that I will throw in for, if I need sci-fi lighting on a floor or a teleporter bay or something, those honeycomb textures stretched out in perspective look so cool. Man, you can use it for so many things. Like I have patterns laid out with panels for like wood flooring, and and anything that is mechanically designed, like wood floors that are all cut to the same dimensions,
right,
or panels or metal or things like that, using your shape tools to lay that out and then do it it comes out looking great. I love it. And boom, we've got this new little corner of the room set up just like that, easy as to please. Now I'm gonna come in and bump that layer with those monitors back the other way a hair, and Bob's your uncle, man. We're done with that room. Now I could either come in here, because this is all still vector, I could leave these as they are and just delete the part that's overlapping, or I could move them if I didn't want those to be quite so recessed. I can come in now and grab a line tool. I don't want my hedge line tool. I want, oh, I'm on the wrong spot. This line tool is the one that I want. And let's say I could come in and, throw some lines in to show where that's recessed. Much thicker than I wanted, but that's okay. Yeah, such cool details so quickly. I cannot tell you how handy this has come in. I've made
I can
techno textures of just shapes and squares. Throw that into perspective, and boom, you've got the side of a ship like that. It's amazing.
And speaking of ships, that's actually a pretty good segue. This also doesn't just apply to buildings. This, and not just weapons. This also, okay, hold on. Let me restate this. This does not just apply to buildings, weapons, or logos, right? This also can apply to vehicles, background characters, and by background I primarily mean more like just to kind of fill out a space and make it feel like it's lived in, And not only that, vehicles. To me, vehicles I think are probably the most unique aspect of this. And I remember you mentioned that you use like Matchbox cars because those are the most realistic looking kind of cars. Mm-hmm. So you can like take a picture of those and obviously, trace over that, or, again, maybe draw the side of a car, put it into perspective, and then, use it as a tracing point, that kind of a thing. And, especially because for me, I also did like sci-fi interiors, but I also ended up drawing like my own spaceship design. And I want to try to obviously use that in different perspectives. probably draw like a downside, upside, and a quarter angle, all that kind of stuff. But again, look at the spaceship we got over here.
Yeah, this is the Talon from the first issue of the Mighty Caw, the pirate ship that he's captured on. And
Yes.
the texture on here is just a bunch of random squares and stuff that I threw on a vector layer and then deleted certain lines, so I ended up with all these weird shapes. I used it as a texture, threw it into perspective, and then every so often I would go back and add a little depth to some of those sections where they either went up or they went down and went into the ship, whatever, just to make it look interesting. Another little side note for anybody who might be interested, anybody who wasn't there for that School of Fish episode when I drew this spaceship, this is actually my box cutter and a screwdriver that I happen to have on hand. They were just sitting on my desk while I was trying to think of a spaceship. The tower on top is an extrapolated version of the little button that slides up and down, and then these little engine grooves on the side of the ship are where the grips for my hand to hold on to, and then this little deck out here with the windows is where the blade came out. And then this is the little rotary screwdriver that I had with all these little sections to put the extra little bits in that are now intakes for the engine. And you can make all kinds of cool stuff out of anything, man.
Actually, no, another good example of this, and I wish I could show it off, but in working with the Galactic Delivery dudes, I remembered Alex in particular. He wanted me to make the pizza station. I can't tell if that was his decision or mine. I think it's his decision, where he wanted me to draw like the pizza place itself, and it was based off of a pizza cutter, like an actual the pizza cutter with the little spinning blade and everything. If I could ever show off that image at some point, I would, because that was actually one of my favorite building, or like my favorite little structure. The annoying thing was it's done in the wacky Pomo style, the wacky postmodern style. So like if I had to draw that in different angles, I would shoot myself, because God, that is so intricate, so many tubes and everything. But that's very. I did not even realize that. I read that book like multiple times. How did I feel?
Oh yeah.
But also like, good on you.
And this is the techno texture that I created. Let me do something real quick so it's a little bit easier to see.
And then also, real quick to point out a comment one of my friends here is stating is another technique I've seen people use is build a house and or layout in The Sims and use that as a reference and or to trace over for perspective shots.
Oh man, The Sims, Minecraft would be pretty good too. I actually downloaded a program that was designed to build 3D landscapes for role-playing games, so we could play online and everybody could get in and walk around in a 3D landscape that you built out of a billion different pieces of clip art. And it had some cool sci-fi stuff, so I bought the program on Steam. It's a little trickier to use than I was hoping it would be, and I haven't had the time to spend to really invest in learning it. But you can build some really cool stuff really quickly in some of these things. And then I can turn it from any angle and snap a picture of it, bring it in and draw over it. And that would always keep, the market on this side and the power station on this side. Everything would always stay in the right places, and I could just move it around. Anything that helps. I built a space station out of Legos one time, just so I could move it around and take pictures from any angle. And I built it out of Lego specifically because this space station got added onto over the centuries. So I wanted to be able to take off parts and show it when it was older and when it's, more modern, and all these different alien races added onto it at different times. So I used different styles of Lego pieces to make it look different in different places. And that just kept my shapes. And then when I got in there, all these cylindrical bits became, like organic, technorganic veined tech that was put on, and other stuff was real blocky and complicated, and other stuff was like hacked together and welded together like orcs did it or something. but that let me keep my shapes and move it around and look at it and get everything right.
Right.
But this is the techno texture that I used for that, and you will see this texture on the background of almost anything I do now that looks complicated, that looks mechanical, that has computer walls or simulators or something. You know, if it's a technical base, it's going to have this stuff on the walls probably. The that micro city that I built,
Mhm.
on the legs of it, it has this texture in there just to show
Uh-huh.
that, oh, there's computery stuff underneath here, underneath the panels. Um, there's
It, I was gonna
so
say,
much you can do with this.
yeah, for sure there is, and it also kind of gives me that Jack Kirby aesthetic of things because Jack Kirby making a bunch of sci-fi stuff, like, oh my gosh, like looking at his older works in Marvel, DC, and you see all like his sci-fi related stuff, or whenever he does something related to a high-tech related character or a setting, he just pops off and just throws like a bunch of strange mechanical things here and there in the background, just to show like, ah, yes, this is high-end technology. We are the 60s, technology, so on, so forth.
This is
So
the future. Yeah.
exactly. And sometimes that's all you really need. I mean, I know nowadays we can look at technology because nowadays it looks either smooth, sleek. And I was also going to mention too, when you're talking about how you build a space station out of Legos, it reminded me when I looked at the behind the scenes stuff for the movie Lightyear, that Buzz Lightyear like spin-off film or whatever.
Yeah.
They actually ended up building a few, like someone ended up creating a few different spaceship models using Lego, and then they gave it to their artists and their designers to design and actually create a spaceship centered around that exact Lego concept, which I thought, again, was very fun and interesting. Whether or not that film is good is up for debate, but still, it was a very fun process to just kind of see how, like, they tend to use anything, in their wake to just try to, like, all right, let's hodgepodge something together and see what we can make out of it, kind of a thing, you know?
Mhm. And like you can take something like this, like I just did, and just bend it down, uh, and then start adding in lines and turn this into like, a three-dimensional surface really quickly of a space station or an overbuilt techno-organic slum or whatever you want it to be.
Or a super crowded high-tech city, or
Yeah.
again, this looks like the texture of the Death Star.
Hmm. And it's so fun. And you can always go in and erase out little sections where you don't need them and things, and extrapolate these lines up or down. It doesn't matter. It it's so much fun to play with. That's the real thing that gets me about it. I've had so much fun playing with these shapes and making such cool things so quickly out of this texture in particular. It's just been crazy, and it's so much fun, and it goes so quickly. I hope we've inspired y'all to try this. I hope we've inspired some of y'all to use some of these techniques. I
Yeah.
hope I explained it well enough that it could be helpful to some people. I could go into more detail about this all day long
Oh,
because this stuff is fun. Maybe we can come back and create some textures another time and show different ways to use them and to apply them to brushes and all kinds of cool stuff.
oh yeah.
Because, oh man, do I have some tricks I could share? I'm here to tell you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Also, I was gonna say too. I remembered in our last video we were talking about like RPGs and other, tabletop RPG stuff. I was actually in the process of creating my own system called Narrate, which is like basically like D&D, but very light and very flexible with any setting. I remember we were talking about like, oh, what if we got characters to compete with each other, all that kind of stuff. Good stuff all around. I would still love to do stuff like that.
Oh man, I love role playing games so much. I have been running the same RPG for like, geez, it's over 30 years now that I've been running basically the same homebrew game
Right.
of superhero adventures, like since I was in high school. And my kids grew up playing it. They learned to read and write on their character sheets. My sons learned to do math on the dice. Like they learn so much from it. They've grown up playing it their whole lives. They're grown adults and they still bicker like toddlers sometimes when it comes time to like plan how they're going to do a fight. But it's been so much fun. I would love to expand it and start playing with more people because my kids are grown up and moved away and they don't have as much free time. The problem is it's homebrew and it's all based on my imagination, and it's very light. It's very rules light. You only have the stats that you need for your character.
Right.
You know, if your character's a tank, we're not worried about your intelligence. We're not worried about your charisma. We're not worried about your physical prowess. Like, you have your plus to hit, you have your plus to damage, you know, and you have a buttload of hit points. Like, that's what you need as a tank. If you're a hacker, then you've got your bonus to hacking and computer skills. You've got your bonus to outsmarting people on rolls, and that's pretty much it. You got less hit points and, you know, less attacks and less, you know, bonus to hit than the tank does. But
I was actually mentioning too, because it's funny that you mentioned a superhero game, because actually one of my friends that was currently in the comments, you know, kind of giving off some really good, you know, tips here and there, is actually trying to run a superhero game. I'm putting you on blast, Lexi. I know you're listening in on this, and she's actually trying to run a superhero game herself. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. I actually made my own character, and actually this could, you know, segue into, you know, me kind of showing off my socials. Obviously, unfortunately, as of recording this video, we're like 2 days away from TikTok being banned, so my TikTok in general is not going to be there. But you can follow me under Esteban Carrero, ESTEBAN CARRRERO. That is my YouTube account. Please go follow that. That'd be fantastic and great.
Go follow it. It's a good account. I thoroughly enjoy it. TS says, we've been talking about doing a game for a while. I got to run one for Hellion and Bash's Kickstarter. After that, I think we get some of the Discord crew together. Oh man, I would be down for that so fast.
I volunteer as true to you. I don't know how to do it, but I want in.
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to run a game too if anybody wants to play a super light, easy to do game that's not hard to figure out. The thing I've enjoyed about it is, for a while I was playing with some friends and we were playing at the local comic book shop, and I mainly started playing there because I knew people would walk by, and when they would see us, and I'd have all the terrain out on the table and all the buildings and stuff and all the little markers for the characters, and they'd be like, people would stand around and want to watch, and they'd be like, can I play? I'm like, yeah, sure, here's your character. And I'd hand them a sheet because we had extra sheets for people who didn't show up that day. And man, it was so much fun, and people could pick it up in like 5 minutes. They'd be like, okay, well, what do I need to do? It was like, all right, it's your turn. This is your bonus to hit. This is your bonus to damage. This is how many attacks you get. These are the weapons and powers that this character has. What do you want to do, man? And creativity is the guide, man. If you think of something cool you want to do with these powers, one of my sons rolled up a ice character, but what he really wanted to be was a super speedster Spider-Man, but he didn't get those powers. But what he decided to do was like, well, can I ice skate with these powers? I was like, give it a shot. And he rolled really well. So he learned to ice skate, and he got really good at it, going really fast. And he's like, well, I want to stick to walls. I was like, try and freeze yourself to a wall. And he rolled really good. So he managed to be able to like freeze his fingertips and his toes to the walls and climb his way up buildings and stuff. He became a super speedster ice Spider-Man. It was freaking nuts. But hey, he tried it, he figured it out, and it worked. That's what I'm all about.
And here's something I will say. You know, I feel like our American education system should be replaced with two things: comic books and tabletop RPGs. Why? Comic books that teaches kids how to read, comprehend, you know, and actually get the understanding of a good story structure. And then on top of that, tabletop RPGs, math, science, actually learning a distance from, you know, one part to another, learning social skills. Where's the lie in my statement?
Learning to work together. Like, so many tabletop games and stuff will teach you, you know, how to manage your assets well, how to, you know, work together cooperatively to gain wealth and influence people. Like, it's not bad. It needs to be a class. That's all I'm saying. We could replace it with gym. You don't have to change your clothes in front of a bunch of other kids when you're all awkward. Just saying. Lexi says, I know another system I was introduced to called Lancer is such a crazy mix of Evangelon, Cowboy Bebop, Gundam, and Mad Max. Oh yeah, that sounds like fun.
That sounds something right up your alley too. So,
oh yeah, that's what I've enjoyed about my game, is because it's so flexible. we've been able to do everything from superheroes to, okay, you wake up in a strange place, you're you, what are you going to do? And, they ended up traveling through time and destroying mankind and ended up destroying the entire universe with a giant living supercomputer that they gave emotional damage to. It was freaking nuts, man.
I mean, I remembered a few of my friends because again, this was part of my homebrew system called Narrate, and I remember we did a superhero game, and we ended up developing, like, they came up with this cool super, like, of course, one of the funny things for us that we need to come up with like anime power move names, and two of the Lexi and actually another friend of mine that popped on, Mika, they played as an electric and a water-based character. So then they created a super move called Toaster Bat. Again, it's stuff like that just makes it just fun. It's enjoyable. I feel
my god! And the stuff people will come up with is just out of freaking mind, out of pocket, crazy stuff. Like I was playing with a friend of mine, and he was playing like a shapeshifter, like a living puddle that could form into whatever he wanted to, and ate protein and organic matter and stuff to survive. Rarely, like he didn't have to. Usually, just if he wanted to get bigger, he would eat stuff. And they're attacking this team, and he can't. There's this one ghost character in this armor that keeps disappearing in and out of the mortal plane and, keeps going to this ethereal realm. And he goes there with Nate attached to him, and Nate won't let go. He's like, I'm going to see if I can get through the cracks of his armor. And he rolled, okay, you get through the cracks of his armor. You get inside, and there's what seems to be a corpse inside of it. And he's like, I'm going to eat it. Never in a million years would have imagined him doing that. He ate it, and now he controls this suit of armor that was keeping this corpse alive, letting him go back and forth out of the material plane. And so now he's got this super powerful teleporting armor. I never in a million years thought that would have happened. And he ended up saving the day because he ate the bad guy. Not something I would have expected.
Only in tabletop RPGs you'll ever hear the craziest things. Like one of my biggest goals in life was, whenever I run a tabletop RPG, I need to make something sound so out of pocket. When you explain it to somebody, they think you're on drugs, when in reality you're the most sober-minded individual ever. But anyways, I feel like, this whole tabletop, I feel like this could just be a whole segment of us.
Oh man, we could have so much fun just telling stories from the role-playing games. Like the time my son was in his underwear catching arrows that the bad guy was throwing at him and throwing him back because his arrows and everything got foamed to the ground. Long story. We'll tell that story next time when we see you on role-playing stories with your Uncle Fish and your Uncle Lee.
All right, everybody, stay awesome, stay weird, and keep life to the easiest. And always remember to always stay ultra.
Absolutely. And follow him on YouTube. Follow me everywhere. But right now, go to GoMrFish.com and sign up for the pre-launch page because Green Zone issue 1 through 4 goes live in February, which is coming up quick. So you better get out there. I'm looking at you, Lexi C, T.S. Luther, everybody in the comments. Y'all need to go over there to Go Mr. Fish and sign up. And we will see you next time. Peace out, y'all.
Stay ultra.